Welcome to Crossroads. The days of cheap prices for Chinese e-commerce companies is likely coming to an end. Now, the White House is moving to close a trade loophole that's being used by Chinese online marketplaces like Shein and Temu, which will eliminate the ability of these companies to sell at their significantly reduced prices. Now, first, let's look into what Chinese companies like Temu and Shein are doing. They avoid paying duties and tariffs normally levied on Chinese imports by selling and shipping to the United States these low-value products by using the de minimis exemption. Normally, that's applied to items that were worth $800 or less. And it wasn't just duties or taxes and so on. The de minimis loophole also allowed these packages to come in with less scrutiny than usual. And this became a major problem, as according to the White House, quote, the majority of shipments entering the United States claiming the de minimis exemption originate from several China-founded e-commerce platforms. And it notes these numbers exploded over the last 10 years. The number of shipments entering the United States claiming this de minimis exemption has increased significantly from approximately 140 million a year to over 1 billion a year. Now, the White House is planning to close that loophole. In an announcement on Friday, the White House is proposing a new rule that will deny the de minimis exemption to packages coming in from China that would otherwise be subject to tariffs. One example is Chinese clothing. Approximately 70% of textile and apparel imports from China are actually subject to tariffs under Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act. However, Chinese e-commerce companies like Shein and Temu have been avoiding, allegedly, these tariffs by claiming de minimis exemptions. Under these new rules, Chinese textiles and apparel goods would no longer be eligible for that exemption. Now, the White House also is looking to implement more reporting measures for these goods, including by requiring, quote, specific additional data for de minimis shipments, including the 10-digit tariff classification number and the person claiming the de minimis exemption. Not so easy anymore. Now, this de minimis law goes back to 1930. It was mainly to make it so that people could buy duty-free products when they traveled abroad. But the Chinese Communist Party and Chinese companies, they've been exploiting that law to a massive degree. Because what does it do? Well, it lets them ship directly from Chinese factories directly to individual buyers. And so it's no longer what it was intended for. It's no longer about people traveling and buying some goods and not having to pay taxes on them. It's about companies finding ways to bypass paying normal fees by shipping directly to consumers. Basically, they cut out the middlemen. They cut out the factories. They don't do these huge shipments, not in bulk at least. They ship one item at a time, and they manage to bypass those normal fees. Now, what's interesting with this is they also say this new proposed rule, this whole thing, would actually help U.S. authorities identify foreign shipments that have chemicals for drugs like fentanyl, which mainly come from China. The issue is that small packages, well, typically they don't get searched as much as the large shipments. And so for U.S. authorities looking for drug shipments and so on, they're not going to look into every single tiny individual package, billions of them. They're going to look at the big shipments. And so this loophole lets the Chinese Communist Party let things slip right past inspections. Now, this is expected to particularly impact Chinese e-commerce sites like Shein and Temu. There are different estimates on what that could actually mean for them. Some analysts are saying it could force the companies to raise prices on shipments to the United States by maybe around 20%, maybe more. We don't really know, but it could have a significant impact on them. This is on top of additional pressure, notably, on Chinese e-commerce companies, including proposals to block Shein's IPO, a lawsuit against Temu from the Arkansas Attorney General saying the platform works as, quote, dangerous malware.
Temu is not an online marketplace like Amazon or Walmart. It's a data theft business that sells goods as a means to an end. What Temu is doing is selling goods at a rock bottom price, not to make a profit off of those, but as a way to get into your phone, your device, and to collect your data, not just traditional consumer data, but using malware, spyware to have complete access to your information. And one step further, their code is written in such a way to evade detection. All of this against the backdrop of who owns the company, who operates the company, which are Chinese communist officials, former Chinese communist officials.
There's another class action lawsuit against Temu in Illinois, accusing the company of violating customer privacy rights. And look, that's in addition to similar controversies against these e-commerce sites in many other countries all around the world. Now, on the Chinese e-commerce companies themselves, there are different claims on how much they currently pay on import duties, according to the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. In 2022 alone, Gap paid more than $700 million in import duties. H&M paid $205 million, and David's Bridal paid $19.5 million. So what about these Chinese ones? Well, it says Shein and Temu, however, paid no import duties at all, the committee said. According to CNBC, they say this. A Shein spokesperson on Friday at the time disputed the committee's assertion and said that it paid millions of dollars in import duties in both 2022 and 2023. But it notes lawmakers contend that by avoiding the hefty import duties the United States imposes on most Chinese textiles, apparel, and footwear, Shein and Temu are able to offer extremely low prices, and by doing so, outcompete their import-paying competitors. Other companies can't compete with it. Now, it notes that Shein has contended that its inventory light supply chain, right? They don't have the middlemen. They just go straight from factories to consumers. That this supply chain and overall business model allow it to offer such low prices, and its pricing structure isn't related to the de minimis exemption. Now, the Chinese companies were already actually seeing some pretty heavy losses, especially for PDD Holdings, which owns Temu. Bloomberg said this in August of 28. It said, PDD Holdings Inc., founder Colin Huang's wealth tumbled by $14.1 billion on Monday. Its shares fell the most in company history after it warned revenue growth would inevitably dwindle. The retreat was Huang's biggest one-day loss ever, dropping him from fourth on Bloomberg's ranking after briefly holding the top spot earlier that month. And it's a slide continued Tuesday, the day after, when the Temu's owner shares dropped a further 4.1%, knocking another $1.4 billion from Huang's riches. Now look, inside China, Chinese businesses are actually facing a real problem of consumption. They have an issue right now where Chinese people are not buying like they used to. And what does that mean? Well, it means that China has to rely on external markets in order to prop up its economy. They have different proposals on how to get people buying in China again, but that's not going to work if people don't have faith in their future well-being, right? If they believe that China's on the decline, they're going to sit on their money and not spend it. They're going to hoard it. They're going to keep it as their, rainy day check in case they need to buy food. They're not going to be going around buying luxury goods. Now, China has two problems. On one side, they have a problem of too many products sitting on their shelves. They have overproduction, right? They have too many products, too many cars, too many things they need to sell, and nobody's buying them. Two, they have a problem of underconsumption. People don't want to buy in China. Then three, actually, the big one, is they're having trouble selling abroad because of the trade war. Outside of China, Chinese businesses are facing this growing trade war, not just in the US, but also in Europe and everywhere else. We'll be talking more about this, though, after I come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges with a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. You can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The White House is looking into closing a loophole being used by Chinese e-commerce companies like Shein and Temu. Now, this is the de minimis exemption. It allows Chinese companies heavily to avoid paying tariffs for low-value goods and thus sell at significantly reduced prices. And this was becoming a big problem in the United States as this whole shipments, these de minimis shipments, they exploded over the last 10 years from approximately 140 million shipments a year to over 1 billion. The White House has now proposed that measures would limit the de minimis entries for goods specifically from China. And outside China, notably, Chinese businesses, they're facing a growing trade war. For Chinese e-commerce companies, what does this mean? Well, this will very likely hit even harder because at the current low prices of products, even with that, financial companies have predicted the platforms could already be losing around $30 on every single sale. They're basically selling at such cheap prices, despite the fact they avoid paying duties, despite the fact they avoid inspections, despite the fact they cut out all the middlemen, they're still losing money allegedly on every single sale. Add to that the weight of foreign tariffs that they're avoiding paying in many instances, and you have a losing business model. And not to mention the fact that other countries, including in Europe, are trying to crack down on the Chinese Communist Party subsidizing products so that they can basically sell below the red line. They can sell at prices nobody can compete with. And if they let them do that, what happens? Well, they put their competitors out of business. They then have the monopoly. Then they can raise prices, which is how they typically operate. That loophole is looking to be closed right now in many different ways because they're saying that China needs to play on a level playing field. And if they're trying to rig the game against all their competitors to shut down competition and then try to gain a global monopoly, well, that's not good for anybody. Now look, already the business model is not sustainable with these Chinese e-commerce companies. Already, it's putting huge pressure on manufacturers in China. In fact, they're protesting in front of the headquarters of these companies. So what happens when that very thin profit margin, actually already below the red line, takes another hit? Or even a few more for that matter? Well, that's when you start getting to the area of, well, if they barely are making it right now, at least according to the data we're able to look at, if you hit that a bit more, that pushes them below the threshold where they're probably not going to succeed. Now, as I briefly mentioned earlier, there's also allegations that some products are being sold on these Chinese platforms being used with Chinese forced labor, slavery. This goes back to a congressional report from June of 2023. This is the Select Committee on the CCP from the House. It says on May 3rd, the Select Committee opened initial investigations into Nike, Adidas, Shein, and Temu. It notes the report's findings described Shein and Temu's exploitation of U.S. de minimis provisions to evade customs enforcement, where they normally, again, check products and make sure they're not illicit drugs or other illegal things, or products being made with slave labor. And it's by doing so, nearly all their products are valued under $800 and can enter the United States uninspected and free from duties that most American clothing brands pay. And notes the report also revealed that Temu has no system, allegedly, to ensure compliance with the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, the UFLPA. And notes that all but guaranteeing that shipments made by Uyghur forced labor are entering American homes, again because of this de minimis exemption. And of course, that has to do with the Muslim minority group in Xinjiang of China, mostly, who are persecuted by the Chinese Communist Party. A lot of the garment industry is made with forced labor in China, slavery. And again, the United States has tried cracking down on that to put a stop to it. The problem is when you have this whole de minimis exemption, it means you can't properly investigate and find whether they're shipping things that come from those locations. And it's in the report, Chairman Gallagher and Ranking Member Krishnamurti identified 4 specific findings. Key finding 1, it says, Temu and Shein alone are likely responsible for more than 30% of all packages shipped to the United States daily under the de minimis provision, and likely nearly half of all de minimis shipments to the United States from China. It says key finding 2, Temu's business model, which relies on the de minimis provision, is to avoid bearing responsibility for compliance with the UFLPA, again that Anti-Forced Labor Act for Uyghurs, and other prohibitions on forced labor, while relying on tens of thousands of Chinese suppliers to ship goods directly to U.S. consumers. And that's important as well because for these companies, a lot of it is clothing. And it's key finding 3, Temu conducts no audits and reports no compliance system to affirmatively examine and ensure compliance with the UFLPA, making sure there's no slave labor. The only measure, it says, Temu reported that it takes to ensure that it is not shipping goods to Americans that are produced with forced labor in violation of U.S. law, was that its suppliers agree to boilerplate terms and conditions that prohibit the use of forced labor. Check the box here that you did not use slaves to produce this product, essentially. And notes that key finding 4, Temu admitted that it does not expressly prohibit third-party sellers from selling products based on their origin in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region. Again, one of the main areas where you have this Muslim minority group, which the CCP brutally persecutes. Now, these latest actions against Chinese e-commerce sites happen as the United States House of Representatives, they're wrapping up what's been dubbed China Week. And as the United States government also pushes for more tariffs on Chinese goods. All of this is in turn taking its toll on the CCP. And it's now becoming apparent that even the regime's actions to save its economy within China, they're not working. I'll be talking about this more only on EpochTV.com. So if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, there's a link in the description below. Click on that. You'll get access to the rest of this episode and also our whole library of shows and our hard-hitting documentaries on issues that matter, like the Chinese Communist Party's 100-year plan to defeat the United States. The CCP is one of the biggest threats to America. They're using things like propaganda, video games, entertainment, movies, culture, to subvert and influence the next generation. If you'd like to find out more about the CCP's plotting against America, watch my documentary, The Final War, the 100-year plot to defeat America. You can find the link to that in the description below, and I'll show you all a trailer before we go exclusively to EpochTV.com for the rest of this episode. I'll see you all there.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.